Remember that feeling? That electric energy that you could just feel in the air, like right before a huge event was about to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Like for a lot of you folks, it might have been, I don't know, the moon landing, maybe,
Yeah.
or a World Series game, something like that.
Right, right.
But uh, picture this. What if the most captivating event wasn't, I don't know, like a game or a space mission? What if it was a boxing match?
Okay.
Like Ali versus Frazier back in
Yeah.
'71.
Right.
Millions and millions of people glued to their screens. But while the world's watching the fight of the century, a small group like ordinary everyday citizens, they're pulling off an extraordinary heist.
Really?
They're breaking into an FBI office.
No way.
But not for money, not for jewels or anything like that. This was for something way bigger.
Okay.
They wanted to expose like the secrets, the stuff that was lurking in the shadows of the Vietnam War.
That's fascinating how this, like one little event, it kind of gets lost in history, but it intersects with this huge, like pivotal moment in American culture.
Right.
You had this whole nation grappling with the Vietnam War, protests erupting on college campuses, like everywhere. Just a deep, deep sense of distrust brewing towards the government.
Yeah, totally. And that's what we're diving into today. That pressure cooker, all that social and political tension.
Oh,
We're going to explore the true story, the real deal of the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI.
okay.
And we're using declassified FBI files, firsthand accounts, and even some stuff from the Wondery podcast, Redacted Declassified Mysteries.
Oh, wow.
It's cool. These sources give us like a multi-layered perspective of the era,
Yeah.
Not just from how the activists saw it, but also like you get these glimpses into like how the FBI worked, how they thought. Okay, so let's set the stage here. Let's paint a picture for our listeners. Like, what was America like back then? What kind of anxieties and tensions were driving all this distrust of the government?
So imagine a time when the nightly news, it's just filled with these images of war protests and draft card burnings and clashes between demonstrators and police. It was intense.
Yeah.
And the chant, "Hell no, we won't go," was like the soundtrack to this whole era. It was everywhere.
Wow.
A lot of people, especially young people, felt like the government wasn't being straight with them about the war. They felt like they were being lied to.
And it wasn't just the war itself, right? It was like
Yeah.
this feeling that the government, especially the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover, was like
Mhm.
crossing the line. Like they were spying on citizens who just dared to disagree.
Yeah, absolutely. The podcast even mentions how people were feeling like they were being watched all the time, like there was an FBI agent behind every mailbox.
Bro.
It was like this feeling was everywhere in all these activist circles. Yeah. And it wasn't just paranoia. It was actually it was shaping how people acted. People were they were hesitant to speak up, afraid of what might happen.
So you've got this atmosphere of suspicion, this unrest, and then, enter our unlikely heroes, I guess you could say, the Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI. Who were these people?
Well, these were 8 ordinary citizens.
Mm.
Nothing like your typical idea of master criminals or anything.
Right.
No, we're talking college dropouts, a physics professor, even a suburban couple, John and Bonnie Raines.
Mm-hmm.
But they were all united, by this shared belief that things needed to be more transparent. They thought people deserved to know what the FBI was up to, especially if it involved spying on American citizens.
It's kind of wild to think about. It's a
Yeah.
bourbon couple risking it all to break into an FBI office.
Hmm.
That's a far cry from bake sales and BTA meetings.
Oh, yeah, it is. And what's even more surprising is that the whole group was led by Bill Davidon. He was a physics professor who had actually seen the Vietnam War firsthand.
Oh, wow.
He had even given shelter to people dodging the draft, so he was really personally invested in this fight against the government overreaching.
So that's where their past activism comes in. They had actually learned a pretty unusual skill, lockpicking.
It's kind of ironic, right? They learned to break into draft offices to try to disrupt things, and then that same skill became essential when they decided to break into the FBI.
So walk us through their plan. How did they even choose their target? How did they pull this off?
Well, they were super secretive about everything. They met in all these secret locations, swore oaths of silence, that sort of thing. They chose their target very carefully.
Okay.
It was the FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania. Seemed pretty low security compared to their headquarters.
Makes sense. And the timing, they did this on purpose, right? March
Mhm.
8th, 1971, that was the night of the Ali Frazier fight.
Pure genius, right?
Yeah.
They knew that with millions of people watching the fight on TV, security would be relaxed,
Yeah.
and any strange activity would probably go unnoticed. They even came up with a name, something that sounded all official. The Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI.
But they needed more than just a good name and a distraction. They needed intel. And that's where Bonnie Raines, the suburban mom, she kind of takes center stage.
This is where it gets really interesting. Bonnie, she disguised herself as like a nerdy college student and went undercover. She actually went to the FBI office for an interview.
Oh.
Pretended she was a researcher interested in how they hired people.
Talk about nerves of steel. Imagine being a suburban mom walking into the lion's den like that. So what did she find out?
She came back with some crucial information. No alarm system, a lot of unlocked cabinets, even a possible second way in.
Nice.
This recon mission was absolutely key, but of course, it wasn't easy.
I bet. Imagine that fear that she might be recognized later, even with the disguise. That must have been terrifying.
Oh, absolutely. It just shows how much these people were willing to risk because they really believed in what they were doing. But Bonnie's intel, it made the break-in possible. Of course, things didn't exactly go to plan that night.
So let's talk about the break-in. The first try, I hear, was a bit of a mess.
It was. Keith Forsyth, their lockpicker, ran into a problem. There was a second lock on the door that they didn't expect.
Oh, wow.
Totally threw them off. They had to abort the mission right there. They were worried they had been, found out.
Man, I can't even imagine the panic. Did they just give up?
Nope. They got back together, took another look at Bonnie's notes, and came up with a new plan. They decided to try the second entrance that Bonnie had found. And as luck would have it, or maybe it was fate, the Ali Frazier fight, which had been delayed, ended up giving them even more time.
So the fight of the century actually helped these guys out.
Yeah.
What happened next?
So, picture this. Keith is working in the hallway that's all lit up, and he's using a crowbar to pry open a door that's blocked by a huge cabinet. It's tense.
Oh, man.
Somehow they manage to get in, they fill up suitcases with all these documents, they even almost run into a security guard on their way out.
Sounds like something straight out of a movie. And then they end up back at their safe house. Right. That was a Quaker conference center.
Yep, a totally normal-looking place. They chose it because it wouldn't attract any attention.
Smart.
It's interesting, that choice really reflects how activism and social movements were all mixed together back then. The Quakers, they're known for being pacifists, and they often helped people who were resisting the war.
So they've got the files there at this peaceful Quaker center. What happens next? What are they looking for in all those stolen documents? I bet there was a mix of excitement and worry. They pulled off this incredible heist, but now they've got stacks and stacks of paperwork to go through. What are they hoping to find?
Yeah, I think it's easy to imagine, that they'd uncover some big conspiracy, like proof that the FBI was really working to stop the anti-war movement.
Right, like some smoking gun memo with J. Edgar Hoover's name on it.
Exactly. But as the podcast explains, the reality was a little less dramatic.
Oh.
They spent hours and hours, days even, just going over these files.
Wow.
And at first, it was mostly just boring bureaucratic stuff.
Really?
Office memos, budgets, even directives about celebrating J. Edgar Hoover's birthday.
So they risk everything for birthday party plans. That's a bit of a letdown.
Well, it wasn't all boring. There were some funny things they found, like a memo about overweight agents having to weigh in every week.
I could see how that might be a little funny in the middle of all that tension, but I'm guessing they were starting to lose hope.
Oh, yeah. You can just imagine how disappointed they were.
Yeah.
Like, do they risk everything for nothing? But then, buried in all those papers, they found it.
The smoking gun?
Not exactly a smoking gun, but something a lot more sneaky. A memo telling agents to interview more activists, but not really to find evidence, but to enhance the paranoia.
Ah, so that's where the podcast episode gets its name.
Yeah.
This wasn't about investigating, it was about scaring people.
Exactly. It proved that the FBI was trying to create an atmosphere of fear among activists.
Wow.
To make them too scared to speak out, to silence them.
This memo becomes the big reveal in Betty Metzger's article for the Washington Post, right?
That's right. Just that one document from one random file gave her the proof she needed to show everyone what the FBI was doing.
Amazing.
It's a great example of how even a small detail can have a huge impact.
And it wasn't just this memo. Mesger kept getting leaks from the Citizens Commission, including those hints about a program called COINTELPRO. What can you tell us about that?
COINTELPRO stood for a counterintelligence program,
Okay.
and it was way more disturbing than anything in those media files. It wasn't just about watching people. It was about actively disrupting and discrediting groups the FBI didn't like.
So not just spying, but actively trying to undermine them. What kind of things did they do?
All sorts of things. Spreading lies, planting fake news stories, even provoking violence and creating divisions within organizations.
Wow.
It was a systematic effort to shut down dissent and neutralize anyone the FBI saw as a threat.
And, like we said before, COINTELPRO targeted anti-war groups, but also civil rights leaders like Martin Luther King Jr.
The revelations about COINTELPRO were a bombshell.
Yeah.
It led to outrage, congressional hearings, and finally the FBI had to change some of its worst practices.
So this break-in, this desperate act by a few activists, actually had a ripple effect that led to real change in the FBI.
It's a great example of how individual acts of courage, even ones that seem reckless, can have a lasting impact.
Yeah.
But it's also important to remember that the FBI at this point were still totally focused on catching the media burglars.
And they get a little sidetracked, right? They fixate on this sociologist, John Grady, who had nothing to do with the break-in.
It's almost funny how obsessed they got with Grady. It seems they wanted so badly to blame someone, to find a scapegoat, that they missed the real culprits entirely.
And while they're chasing Grady, they end up orchestrating another break-in, the one at the draft office in Camden, New Jersey.
It's like something out of a spy movie, but the good guys are the ones doing all the shady stuff.
And the funny thing is, their involvement in the Camden break-in actually helps the defendants when it goes to court.
It totally backfires. The trial becomes less about the break-in itself and more about exposing the FBI's own illegal activities. And the jury ends up siding with the defendants, finding them not guilty.
A big win for the anti-war movement and a huge blow to the FBI's already damaged reputation.
Exactly. It was a total PR disaster for the FBI. And all this time, the real media burglars stayed hidden. Nobody knew who they were for over 40 years.
It wasn't until 2014 that Betty Menzger finally revealed their names in her book. That's really amazing. They stayed quiet even though they could have taken credit for what they did.
It shows how dedicated they were to the cause, how willing they were to sacrifice for something bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And it adds another layer of intrigue to this already fascinating story.
So we've covered the break-in, the investigation, the impact on the FBI. But let's step back for a minute and talk about the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
What does this media burglary tell us about American society in the 1970s? And how does it connect with us today?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
On the one hand, it's a story about a specific time, the Vietnam War, the anti-war movement, the distrust of government.
But it goes beyond that time too, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's about power, secrets, and the right to disagree.
Exactly. Just think about how brave those 8 people were to go up against the FBI, the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country.
Yeah.
They believed that the public deserved to know what their government was doing, even if it meant breaking the law.
And their actions started a national conversation about the limits of government power, about the importance of transparency and accountability. And those conversations are just as relevant today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
The ways we spy on each other and control information may have changed, but the basic issues haven't.
That's right.
Who has access to information? Who decides what stays secret? And what are we willing to do to hold those in power accountable? It's pretty inspiring, right, to see how like a small group of people can make such a big difference, even when the odds are stacked against them.
It is. It shows you that change doesn't always come from, the people in charge. Sometimes it takes regular folks who are willing to, break the rules a little bit, to challenge how things are done.
As we've been talking about this whole story, I keep thinking about the personal journeys of these people. Like, it's one thing to talk about big political movements, but these were real people who put their lives at risk.
That's a really important point. These weren't just, names in a history book.
Right.
They had families, jobs, everyday lives, and they were willing to risk everything because they believed in something.
Think about Bonnie Raines.
Yeah.
She's a suburban mom, and then suddenly she's like a secret agent, gathering information, all while probably still worrying about, what to make for dinner. It makes you realize that anyone can be a part of change.
Exactly. Her story, and really the stories of everyone in the Citizens Commission, shows that courage and conviction can come from anywhere. They all had their own reasons for doing it, their own fears, but they came together for a common goal.
It's like it shows the power of people working together.
Yeah,
How individuals, even if they come from totally different backgrounds, can achieve incredible things when they believe in something bigger than themselves.
that's right.
And for those of you listening who lived through the Vietnam War era, this story might bring back a lot of memories, good and bad.
I bet.
It was a crazy time, a time of uh, so much social and political change. It felt like the country was at a turning point.
Exactly. And the media burglary, in a way, it kind of captured the feeling of that era. It was this act of defiance, a statement that the public had a right to know the truth, even if it meant breaking the law. It forced the country to face some hard questions about security and freedom.
And those conversations are still important today, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The ways we keep tabs on each other and control information might be different now, but the fundamental questions are still the same.
For sure.
Like, who has access to information? Who gets to decide what secrets are kept? And what are we willing to do to hold those in power accountable?
Those are big questions.
Yeah. And the story of the media burglars, it gives us a way to think about those questions. It reminds us that change often starts small, with ordinary people who say enough is enough to injustice and secrecy.
Exactly. People who are willing to speak up against those in power, even when it's dangerous, even when it seems impossible. That's a legacy we can all learn from.
Absolutely. The media burglary, it wasn't just about some stolen files. It was about the right to dissent, the limits of government power, and the courage to demand transparency. If you're interested in learning more, there's so much out there. You can check out the Declassified Documents, read Betty Metzger's book, or listen to the Redacted Declassified Mysteries podcast.
There's a lot to explore.
It's a chance to connect with a really important moment in history and think about what it means for us today. What parts of the story stuck with you? What questions do you still have? Share your thoughts, and let's keep this conversation going.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's a story that reminds us that even when things seem really tough, ordinary people can make a real difference.
Absolutely. And until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep the spirit of those media burglars alive.